And let the record show all 5 board members are still here. And I'll give everybody a chance to readjust their computers. There we go. All right. On the screen. We'll call this meeting to order, and has everybody had a chance to pull this one up? All right, first item, we have 4 items, 4 minutes that need to be approved. Is there a motion for items 1 through 4? Motion by Mrs. Andrews, second by Mrs. Whitfield. Any discussion? All in favor, all opposed. Motion carries 5-0. We have 1 item added, P2. Dr. Fenoy, anything else to add?
Not at this time.
And anything to withdraw?
No, sir.
We have 2 items that have been pulled, and they already should on your agenda, DS2 and policy A3. Does anybody want to pull any other items? Mrs. Whitfield.
Excuse me, can I pull the naming of facilities, 7.03?
7.03.
Thank you.
Policy 02.
Yes, policy 2.
Okay. Any others? Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Motion by Mrs. Brill, second by Mrs. Andrews. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We move to, we have no speakers scheduled. Any disclosures or abstentions? Superintendent's comments.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Shaw. Good afternoon. I'd like to make my comments today to provide an update on the school police department. Chief Kidsrow has secured the purchase of 50 new school police patrol cars that are on their way and will be put into service as soon as we receive them. Additionally, Chief Kidsrow has advised me that to date that we have 171 sworn police officers in the department, including 25 new officers who have been hired in the past 60 days and are already at work. We also have 7 officers who are in their final stage of hiring process, and another 50 officers who are in the pipeline. I would also like to take a moment to welcome back a school police officer who emulates the standards not only of security, but also the care for the school and the children he is tasked with protecting. Officer Robert Keating, or Officer Bob as he is better known, returned to work last month to his assignment serving Wellington Landings Middle School. I have learned in talking to several people that Officer Bob is synonymous with Wellington Landings, and like most of our school police officers, he is absolutely beloved at the school and in the community. He's a former New York City homicide detective for over 23 years. Officer Bob joined the school police department and has been dedicated to Wellington Landings Middle School for the past 11 years. Unfortunately, Bob was sidelined for 8 months after a driver at his school hit him while turning into the campus. He suffered extensive injuries and reportedly still has pain from the accident. But that hasn't stopped him from reporting for duty to protect his students and his school daily. Officer Bob is an example of many of the school police officers who have come to our district after leaving or retiring from other police departments across the country and have put their training and resolve to work for our schools and our children. Our school officers are trained, they are dedicated, they are caring, and we are fortunate to have each and every one of them in our ranks. Officer Bob, we thank you for your service, for the example you set to our district, and for the support you give our families, students, and the school. We're happy to welcome you back.
Thank you. Board member comments. Mrs. Whitfield.
I just wanted to make a really quick comment rather than pulling this item, but I just wanted to say thank you to the city of West Palm Beach's golf course for giving some of the spaces for the Forest Hill High School. I have gone to work there many times, and it has just, even before when I was working here, and it is just very difficult to find a place to park, and what they're doing to be able to share some of that space during the week with our staff, I think is wonderful, and I just wanted to say thank you to them for that.
Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you, and I too would like to welcome back Officer Bob. You're loved at Wellington Landings and in the Wellington community. You're a legend out there, Officer Bob. Wellington Landings know you, know your work, and they thank you for all that you do. You're more than just an officer. You're a member of the family. And I would like to say I had a chance to go to a few football games recently. I'm not a big football games person, but I've been out there, and it's been a lot of fun. I want to thank the Chief of Police, Chief Kissero. You made it happen. All of the officers, the schools, the high schools, the administrators, the area region superintendents, the instructional superintendents, the teachers, the staff, and the parents, everybody. You're out there, you're very visible, and we're having a lot of fun at the games. And the new security measures that have been put in place for all of our schools, they're working. And the children and the students, the parents, everybody that's coming to the games, they're saying, hooray, we took it to another level, and we're enjoying sports again, especially our afternoon sports. And you know, it really truly does get dark. We start early, we have a little darkness, and so it's an even switch. The students say, oh, we like it at night, but it really truly gets dark before the game is truly over. I like the idea that students can't leave after the third period, so as I was moving from one school to the other, I had to get in my car and quickly move around the area of District 6 to get to the next school before the third quarter, because those gates are locked and you're not in and out after a certain time. So the warning, the safety procedures, all of the people working together as one family to keep the children safe at our games, this is big time, and you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The only comment that I'll make is related to Officer Keating. On Tuesday, I had the pleasure to go out to Wellington Landings to see him. It was a priority, and I really want to thank Dr. Fenoy for his comments that were made today. I think that that was so appropriate and certainly fitting. And to all of our school police officers, every time I've been on a school campus, and especially if we're out in the hallway at the change of classes, it just absolutely amazes me, and it's heartwarming to see the relationship that students on our school campuses have with the police officers who are there, who are so committed, so dedicated, and so involved in what happens with our students every day. And I also want to thank him for what he did. So that concludes our comments. So we'll move to new business. Our first item is DS2, use of school seal, state seal. Dr. Fenoy. Oh, we did. Nope. We need to vote on the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve consent? Motion by Mrs. Whitfield, second by Mrs. Brill. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? So, new business. Use the state seal.
Yes, DS2, use the state seal in school district buildings. I recommend the board ratify and approve the use of the state seal of Florida to be displayed in each district building to comply with Florida statute 1003.44, subsection 4. Find that this use of the Great Seal by the school district meets the conditions of Florida Admin Code Rule 1-2.0021, and authorize the superintendent or designee to take all necessary actions to implement the posting, and the board chairman or designee to sign the authorization related to these recommendations.
Is there a motion? Motion by Mrs. Andrews, second by Mrs. Whitfield. Mrs. Brill.
Thank you. And you two don't have to be up there, because I'm actually going to be sharing a story with all of you, and I'm glad we have some time. You know, you've all heard us sitting up here saying that it takes a village, and this particular item is a reflection of that village. You know, just because we sit up here on the dais, and I'm including you, Mr. Fenoy, and Dr. Fenoy, and also you, Ms. Rico, we don't know everything. And so the legislature put something in place last year that requires that we have the verbiage "In God We Trust" on the wall at each school. And so school started, and there were some temporary signs that were placed in our schools, and some of the teachers were upset. They saw it, and a few of them were very offended. I cannot remember which teacher it was that finally came to me, and I got a bunch of phone calls, but they said, and I'm embarrassed that this came from St. Lucie County and not us, but they said that they had heard that in St. Lucie County, they put the state seal as that sign because it says, "In God We Trust." And who can be offended by the state seal? So I immediately called staff. Everybody said it was brilliant. So I'm sorry that we didn't think of it ourselves. But this is one of those instances where we have teachers or employees at the schools that see something that just rubs them the wrong way, and they came up with a solution that what could be better than putting the state seal with the verbiage that's required on the walls of every school. So if the teachers are listening that were involved with that, I want to say thank you. I can't believe it came from St. Lucie County, but we won't go there. And so I fully support this item. But, you know, when all of you have suggestions, don't think, because when they came to me, they were like, this is going to sound crazy. And, you know, they didn't think that we would take it seriously. But don't think that any suggestion is something that we're not going to take seriously, because it does take a village. And again, this is one of the reflections of that. Thank you.
Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. I think this is a great idea. I'm completely in favor of it. The only thing I was thinking when I read this was that even though we are doing it just to comply with the rules, the state seal means something to me. This is my state. So I wanted to make sure that as a district, we try to work towards having it look nice in some way. I know I talked to Mr. Oswald about framing it and trying to make it look better in that way. You know, I know we don't have money to just start throwing at it, but maybe over time we can make it look more professional when you walk in to the district, because we are using what is to me a very important symbol and putting it up as people walk into schools. So I wanted to make sure that it looks good as we try to do that.
Thank you. Any other comments? So my prediction is there'll probably be legislation that'll be entered to question the right to do that, but that's just being mean. Mrs. McQuinn.
I can't stand it. I was going to let it go, but I can't. Is the state giving us any money to fund this?
It's a good thing we have a lot of extra time today, and I was trying to rush through this. I don't know why. I think it just figured we have so much time, we need to take advantage of it for a change. So with that, we'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next item is P2. And this item has good cause because this allows the employees impacted to start their position as soon as possible. Dr. Fenoy.
Yes, sir, P2. I recommend the board approve the personnel agenda as submitted.
Motion by Mrs. McQuinn, second by Mrs. Whitfield. Any discussion? Mrs. McQuinn.
I am going to vote to approve this item, but I do want to call attention to the fact that the employee being recommended via board policy 3.45, while that does meet the requirements, that recommendation does meet the requirements of 3.45, I feel it's so important that we follow our own employment hiring procedures, unless it's a situation where we do have to put somebody in a position right away. So I'm just voicing an objection over using a policy that I find to be unnecessary. I think this position should have been advertised and interviewed. And believe me, this employee is amazing, understands our district, understands the legal department, highly qualified. It has nothing to do with the employee. I would probably hire her myself. It has to do with the fact that we didn't follow the process. And I will be voting to approve the item, but I have to be on record that I would really like for every department to please, unless it's an emergency, follow the process.
Any other comments? Now we'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next item is policy A3. Dr. Fenoy.
Yes, policy A3. I recommend the board approve development of new policy 1.041 equity policy.
Is there a motion? Motion by Mrs. Whitfield, second by Mrs. Brill. I'm not sure who pulled that one. Mrs. Brill.
Thank you. And this is really an easy fix. When I first read the policy, I didn't read the whole thing. I only got through the first paragraph, and I was like, what? Did they not include students with disabilities? But then as I read further into it, I realized that you did. But the first 3 lines where you have, it goes to line 4, and I think what you meant by ability was physical and/or learning abilities. I think you need to spell that out, because when I first read that first paragraph, I really thought that I was thinking, I'm sitting up here almost 8 years, and how could you not include students with disabilities in an equity policy? But then when I read further into it, you did have physical and learning abilities. So again, it's under the purpose of the policy where you state that we're committed to eliminating race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, ability or socioeconomic status as predictors for academic outcomes. You need to put something in there about disability, specifically like either, as you say later, physical and/or learning abilities, because if I missed it and misunderstood it, then I'm sure other people will.
All right. Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. I actually just want to have a quick discussion on this with the board because I'm not 100% stuck to this or feeling that it's completely important, but I want to bring it up. So in the beginning part of the policy, we talk about making sure that everyone has equal opportunities. And then the second part of the policy, we talk about bringing up education related to all of those different groups. So we have the study of African Americans, contribution to African American diasporic people, the study of Hispanic and Latin, study of Indigenous, study of women's, and then disabilities, but we didn't put anything there about gender or LGBT communities. So if everyone else feels comfortable with it, I think that it might not be a bad idea to include that as, we have it in the part about keeping everybody equal, but we don't have it in the part about educating on the contributions to society that LGBT community has made. So, anyone?
Well, I saw a whole bunch of yes heads on that one, so.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. Any other comments? If not, we'll call the question on this one. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next one is policy 02.
Yes, policy 02, naming of school facilities. I recommend the board approve development of the proposed revised policy 7.03, naming of school facilities.
Motion by Mrs. Brill, second by Mrs. Andrews, and I think Mrs. Whitfield, you pulled this one.
I mostly pulled this because we have time and I want to talk about it. So, thank you. So, the thing that I find this fascinating that we're headed this direction. I'm excited that the Education Foundation is going to partner with us on it. So, there's just a couple of things about it I thought that I would love to discuss. So the first real part is about the money. So we're going to get hypothetical money coming in that's going to be to name schools. And then I saw in there that we talked about naming, or that the money could be used for school district purposes or specifically for that school's purpose. I wanted to just hear what your thoughts were on maybe how we decide the value of a school's naming. Like it just said that it would be, like commensurate with whatever value is, but I was just curious as how we decide what 40 years of a name is worth or what, a legacy name is worth. If there is like some sort of, country I don't know, something that we do nationally, a national standard on this, so I was curious about that. And then how we would spend the money, is it like the SAC at the school that's going to decide that? Does it come back to us if it's a certain amount of money? I imagine something in the millions for some of these schools to be named for a legacy, so would that come back to us since it's such a high amount of money, and would there be some sort of a process, a granting, deciding on how that money is spent? And hold on, I had one other thing. We'll answer those, and then I'll remember the other one.
Ms. Paul?
I'll defer to Chris.
I see my boss is looking over my direction. Certainly, this board could establish parameters. I mean, you are the policymaking body, but naming of a school does need to come before this board. And with this discussion, we certainly could include in the board report how the money would be spent. I would think there might be a number of cases where there are physical improvements to the school that the school would benefit in that regard, or the creation of an endowment like there was in the case of Dreyfus. So if this board would like to set parameters for staff so that we don't even bring you something that is outside a certain range or magnitude.
And how do you decide what it's worth? Is there a way to do that?
I think your point about it being in the millions is on point. I don't know if my colleague from the Ed Foundation is in the room. I don't see him, but perhaps he could give us some guidance.
But I think that would be something that we would look at when we bring it to the board and have conversations on kind of setting parameters around what is reasonable and so forth, and the use of the money in a respectful way. But again, that's a conversation that, we haven't had yet.
Okay, I remembered my last question. So what if a school's already named? What happens then? Do you add on to the name, or do we vote to change a name?
That would also be something that, and it depends on how much money they're bringing forward, quite honestly, So if they come with $1 billion, then, we'll have that discussion. We can name a wing, or we can name a corner or something like that. Not to be flippant with it, but, I think it's situational, and it just depends on where we are at that particular school and what the needs are of that school.
Okay. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. I think this is a really cool thing, and I'm very excited that we're opening this opportunity up to the schools.
And we've had schools that have had, I remember not too many years ago, the Media Center, I think, at Bear Lakes was named after a specific teacher and stuff. So those kinds of things are done pretty regularly. Mrs. Andrews?
Absolutely. Just with West Tech, when it had been closed down for 11 years and we were getting ready to bring it back into existence, the Hill Foundation gave us $150,000, and we named one of the buildings after the Hill Foundation. So we're doing this as we speak, so yes.
Thank you. And I also see this more as a clarification of our policy that's sort of been in place, but many of you will remember our wonderful former CTA president, Robert Dow, and I was at the naming, I believe it was Western Pines Middle School, where they named the media center for him. So we have done it, and I think it's wonderful. So it's not always just attached to money. It's attached to people who have done wonderful things at different schools. And I just, I don't see this policy as a way to just market, give us money, we're going to name a school after you. It's just really, having a policy wrapped around what we're already doing. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
And it's a way, I think Mrs. Brill's point is really well taken, because it's one of the few ways we have to maintain our history as a system. And, I can still remember the names of a lot of people over the years that have had different parts on their campuses and who they were. And if that wasn't there, we would forget about these individuals. Mrs. Andrews.
Ditto, Mr. Shaw. And the last piece, the stakeholders, the people that are a part of the school, the history of that community based on what people have done. All of this has to be a part of the discussion about the value for that name.
With that, we'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We have 40 minutes. So we will adjourn this meeting and move to the special meeting on the adoption of the policies right at 5 o'clock.